All right, you maggots, listen up. Uh, I just wanted to show you. This is a wireless, a solderless breadboard. In my video, I said a wireless, and there's capacitance in here and inductance caused by these connectors. So at certain frequencies, it will work, but you got to be real careful whenever you're building an RF circuit on a solderless breadboard. I almost said wireless breadboard again. That's part of getting old. In your mind, you're saying solderless breadboard. You see what this looks like in your mind, but out comes wireless breadboard instead of solderless breadboard. Now, I just had a guy make a comment. How can you resist videos where a guy says, all right, you maggots, listen up. Now, first of all, I believe that's from uh, Full Metal Jacket. I think he used to call people maggots, or that guy that later on went into different videos or TV shows, and you use that. Now, I used it from a guy I worked with. He was in Vietnam. He was only there like a week. And when they were crossing the river, the guy behind him's gun went off and shot him in the hand. So he came home. And this guy, he could crawl underneath the benches and come up and tie your legs together, and you would never know it. he made snares and stuff. He was funny. So we would affectionately call each other, "Hey maggot, where are you going for lunch?" So to me, it's an endearment. It's an affection. Uh, I had an instructor. His name was Jake Miller. He's still alive in Reds, and he would call us anything from Juby Doobs to scumbags, and depending on what mood he was in. But he'd be up there teaching, and the two kids in the seats would just start arguing or just talking over him, and he'd get really mad, and his eyes would bat. They start batting real fast, and he'd go out of the classroom and light up a cigarette and stay out there, and then he'd calm down and come back in. But he was a ball breaker. He would do a test, and he'd have a circuit up there, and you had all the values, and he'd say, what's the resonant frequency of that circuit? And you had all your voltages and currents too. And that's the clue that something's up. Now he knew he was he had trick circuits. So you look and he says, what's the resonant frequency of the circuit? And there you see a coil, you see a capacitor, you think it's straightforward, but he also gives you voltages and currents. And sitting down in there is a fuse. And you should say to yourself, well, why does he have a fuse on an oscillator circuit? That's because as the circuit starts to reach resonance, the fuse opens up. So the circuit never reaches resonance. That's the kind of thing he tried to prepare you for. But it's ball breaker. In other words, he teaches you certain things all week long, and then when he gives you a test, he throws you a curve, and that's a curveball. So I put down 0. I'm doing the X of O, X of C, X. I was never good at frequency calculations. I hated the math part of it. I had a card. There was this Reds card. It finally disintegrated. It was a card that had all the Ohm's law on it. It was a bookmarker, and you would carry that. Well, whenever you paid your tuition each week, they give you a card or a Reds pencil. So in other words, you'd have one of these cards, and you'd stick it in each book, and it had the Ohm's law on it and the resistor code. What colors and the amount and the multipliers. It had that. So you get that out, and you're rusty after a while on doing the frequency. So I'm looking at this going, well, I'll put 0 down, just hand the paper in. And I got it right. And then he can't ask me how I came up with the 0. Later on he did. He goes, you just took a guess. I said, yeah, I just figured it was going to be a trick circuit, so I put 0 down. So I got credit for it. Other guys were doing the frequencies, and they were all pissed off that they came up with the frequency, and that it couldn't reach frequency because the fuse opened up. Now, one time, this guy was heavily into teletype, so that's where I got my serial data education from this guy. Almost every week, it was a teletype circuit, and one of the tests, he gives you these couple transistors. There's like 6 transistors. There's a switch. and you're supposed to figure out what this circuit does. And you're putting the signal in, and when you throw the circuit, all it does is flips the logic. So the teletype signal, which is serial, which is binary serial. Well, actually, it's ASCII. And let's see, ASCII. Yeah, there's baud code and there's ASCII. I got to think about this stuff because it's a long time ago. But the switch just inverted it. Now, you say, well, what does that do? Well, if the person on the other end is inverted, then you invert. And then it's sort of, I won't say it's scrambled, but it sort of is. If someone's broke into the line and trying to intercept the teletype, now it's upside down. Their teletype gets gibberish because their teletype might not have the inverter switch. Anyway, so he does this thing. I didn't get that. I didn't get that at all. I was like, followed it through. It made no sense to me. Nobody got it right. And he was upset. So, but in my mind, I knew that you could invert a serial string. So when I had a decoder box. Now, the name of the company's going in and out of my mind. Oh man, it's just coming in and out. It wasn't a company. It was a Zenith box. Oh, I got it. Early on in TV decoders, Zenith made this box, and they sold to the cable companies. And each box had a serial number, and the serial, and it was long, and that serial number was in a electrically erasable prom. It wasn't the one with the window on it. Electrically EEP. So a guy gives me the box, and he tells me the serial number of that box is somewhere in there. So I went inside. They found this chip that they took a blob of epoxy. They put it on the chip, and then they put this little plastic cap over it, and it was stuck on the board. So I started wiggling it, and it came out of the socket along with the epoxy and the cap. And I'm looking at the bottom, and I can count how many pins. I could put extension wires off the pins. I took a guess. I went over the chip. The chip seemed to be. It wasn't. I think I remember it was 18 pin, 9 on each side. Yeah, something weird like that. And I knew it had the number for the box in it. So I went over to Tech Ops, and I'm going through all their books trying to find an electrically erasable prom with 18 pins. And I found it. And I went home, and I set it up with my, I showed you my EEPROM programmer, and I'm reading this thing. And I read it all out as ones and zeros. I put them on a piece of paper. And then back then, you didn't have your calculator inside of Windows can change binary to decimal. I didn't have that. I had to actually divide it by 2, the old method, old school. And it's a big, long number. And I spent hours. And I got a string, the binary box number, the number, digital number became a binary number. So I had this long string of ones and zeros on the kitchen table on a piece of paper. And now I'm going up and down trying to figure out the binary wasn't matching the box. And I'm like, what is going on? Well, the binary that came out of the chip didn't match my number. I took the serial number of the box and turned it into binary, and I had the readout from the chip itself from my EEPROM programmer, and it wasn't looking. And I'm sitting there. All of a sudden, I look, and I'm thinking back in school and the serial data, and all of a sudden, I'm thinking inverted, and I look, and all the ones and zeros that came out of the EEPROM are backwards. A 0 is a 1 and a 1 is a 0. But that's very easy in electronics. You just put an inverter, or the next chip inverts when the input coming into it inverts. So I now took the EEPROM out of my burner, and I made another EEPROM converter socket to go in that Zenith box. And I made sure both the EEPROM that came out of the box and the one I made, the adapter plug-in unit, read the same on my programmer. So now this other guy says to me, he says, let me give you a number of a box that's the boss's at the cable company. He's got everything turned on. So the guy gives me the number. So now I take the number and I divide it by 2, and I get binary, and then I invert it. I put it on the EEPROM. I plug it in. I plug that EEPROM into that Zenith box, close it up, take it over to this guy's house, and we put it on. He's on the Zenith system, and we turn it on, and nothing's happening. None of the channels are coming out. So I have the scope over there, and I'm looking at this waveforms, and that chip is putting out a number. That EEPROM is putting out a number into the microprocessor section. And I said to the kid, this is all working. It's seeing the main signal, and it's responding to it, but nothing's happening. So just before we give up, I'm ready to close it up and go home and say, well, it didn't work. One of the premium channels starts working. And I went, oh boy. So then I said, put the cable box on another premium channel and let it sit there for a while. So it's sitting there, all of a sudden, bing, it comes on. And what it does is it's waiting for the boxes that are turned on, because the person pays for the service. That number comes through on the stream every so often. That number comes through, goes into the box, and then it flips a part or a gate inside the micro, which you can't get to. And then the box turns on for that channel. And that's good for so many hours before it flips back. So now we keep going down the line, all the different premium channels. And now he's got everything. And I left. And then I talked to this other guy. He says, what you do with the box is you put it on channel 3 when you first get it home. They give you the box, you sign out for it. Put it on channel 3, let it sit there. And the load is much quicker. It does the load for each box that's out there and all the premiums at the same time. So in other words, you put your box on channel 3 off the cable box, and it'll hit and turn all your channels on right away. You don't have to, or you can let it sit at each one of the premium channels, and then it'll program it and it'll work. So it was hilarious stuff. But I remember this teacher we had, and he would call us all kinds of names when we weren't paying attention. And I sort of do the same thing. And you get people that, I had this guy write this really long paragraph. Now, when someone writes me a really long paragraph, I don't read it. I read the first sentences. I know where it's going to go. You can get more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. Well, who the hell's catching flies? But I understand what he's saying. And he goes, if you ever expect to get to 1,000 subscribers, you better start. Well, it happened, didn't it? You better start being nicer. It happened, and it killed him because I clicked on his name, and he had videos, but he was a mansy pansy, or I said the name before. What these guys are, in other words, they're so meek, and they don't use any swear words. They don't get upset, and that's not me. I'm sorry. I'm past that. I told you that the engineer in RCA, he straightened me out. He says, you think you're going to work with engineers being that nice? He says, you got to let them know what you're thinking. You got to know that they screwed up. You can't walk away from problems. And that my father used to teach me. Just walk away. Just walk away. Just walk away. We won't go into that. That's not how you want your children to stand up for themselves. Yeah, you don't want them starting fights all the time. But even Leave It to Beaver episodes, Ward told Beaver to stand up for himself. Of course, it was a girl involved. They have to put that twist in it. But in other words, I think the girl gave Beaver a black eye. Well, anyway, you can learn a lot from watching Leave It to Beaver. But yeah, I do that. I do say maggot. And some people go, that's offensive. Well, don't watch my videos. Well, I watch the video, but I turn the sound off and I use closed caption. Well, my videos must be doing their job, aren't they? I tell you about stuff that nobody else tells you about. I think that's it. All right, that's it.